Jake Paul has just beat Nate Diaz in the boxing ring, and what does he do right away? He calls out Nate Diaz for a rematch in MMA, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down why that is a huge mistake for him to be making next. So Jake Paul's recently signed with the PFL, an MMA organization. He's been wanting to make his debut for quite a while. He announced it earlier this year. And he's calling out his first opponent, Nate Diaz, who he just boxed. He just beat him in the boxing ring. And now a completely different sport Jake wants to enter into Nate's territory. Nate Diaz has been training MMA since he's like 11 years old. He's a Gracie black belt, jiu-jitsu practitioner. He knows MMA like the back of his hand. He was an elite competitor in the UFC, which is obviously the biggest MMA organization in the world. He's had a great run. He's fighting tons of different high-level competition. He always fought the best of the best in the UFC. He beat Conor McGregor. He fought Jorge Masvidal, Anthony Pettis, Leon Edwards. The guy's lethal not only with his hands, but on the ground, in the clinch. And this is just a step too far for Jake Paul. It doesn't even really make sense for why he would want to do it. I guess because he signed with the PFL, he has to fight in MMA. But even right after this fight, Jake Paul said that he wants to be a world champion in boxing by 2026. So why would he just go into MMA with a completely different sport, having to learn different trades, different martial arts? MMA is completely different from boxing. Instead of just the basic 4 punches, the jab, the cross, the uppercut, the hook, MMA has so many more different tools. There's elbows, there's knees, there's kicks, there's wrestling, there's jiu-jitsu. There's so many different facets you have to worry about. It's not just the hands. And that's all Jake's been doing for the past however many years now since he started boxing. He's just been training boxing, fighting MMA guys in boxing, but not fighting them in MMA. Finally looks like he wants to do that. But Nate Diaz is different. For Jake, this will only take away more time from his boxing career. He says he wants to be a world champion, which is very far away right now. So just to take up MMA for train for, let's say, 6 months and take that much off of his boxing career would definitely not be beneficial for him. Even his rivals and the guys he could have mega fights against would just pass him up in dedication and experience in the sweet science, like KSI, Tommy Fury. Jake has just got a new boxing team completely, and he's still adjusting to them. He still needs to put in that work in boxing, and to just take up MMA to fight Nate Diaz is a terrible idea. Nate Diaz will most likely just run right through him in MMA like it's nothing. Nate Diaz is known for his ground name. Hell, I mean, he put Jake Paul in a guillotine in their boxing match, and Jake took that as, you know what, I want to fight MMA now. It just makes no sense. Like, sure, Nate Diaz is past his prime. He's over the hill now. He's 38 years old, blah, 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 blah. But come on, in the cage, no matter how old he is, he does have a lot of mileage, but is that really going to matter in the cage against Jake Paul? He's a veteran in the game, and there are guys out there like KSI who's fighting Tommy Fury. You can fight either the winner or the loser of that, and he has so many other options out there in boxing and get him some huge paydays, some big fights, and potentially closer to what he says he wants to do in becoming a world champion. Nope, we're just going to put that all on pause and say, Nate Diaz, I want to fight you in a real fight in MMA, something I've never done before. Sure, Jake Paul has a kind of wrestling pedigree. I think that was a high school pedigree, but that's pretty insignificant compared to what Nate Diaz has. Sure, Jake Paul has boxing, maybe has a little bit of wrestling, but Nate Diaz has been putting all of it together for so many years now in the UFC. Jake really wouldn't have nearly enough time to catch up to Nate in MMA. I think he's making a big mistake. Maybe he's thinking, I'm a bit younger than Nate Diaz. Even if I lose, then it is MMA. But he still has this like cocky persona and aura that if he just gets finished in MMA, it could be a really bad look for his career, his brand. And it's really not worth it. Why put that all on the line when you can continue your boxing career? It's been going pretty well. You can take these MMA guys and put them in the boxing ring. To go into the cage with them and try to rival them, try to match them in the cage, it's going to be very tough to do. Jake said in a recent interview that this is what he wants next. He wants to fight Nate Diaz in MMA, and he wants to run it no matter what sport, anyone, anytime, and any place.
I asked him about the offer, $10 million for an MMA fight. He said whatever he has to do to get a rematch with you. What do you think?
So he's down? Go! He's accepting the offer. This is I'm with it. Let's go. That's what I said. It's only fair. I beat him in my arena. I'm gonna go to MMA, Cowboy Stadium, make history, and I know I could beat him in MMA. Shout out to the Ohio wrestling background, and I'm coming for his head. Bah!
Is that next?
Let's go. Yeah, let's do it. I'm always ready. Come on. Anyone, anytime, any place, anywhere, any sport. MMA. Let's go. And I don't give.
I think it's self-explanatory to see why Nate Diaz would be a huge favorite in this fight. Even the odds have recently come out. I think Nate Diaz is like minus 1,200 or something crazy. It's obviously not going to be competitive. And honestly, it could even be wider than that when the fight rolls around. So many people want to see Jake Paul flatlined, destroyed, humbled. And he'd probably be giving them that if he did this fight against Nate Diaz, a real MMA fight. Sure, Jake Paul won the boxing match and he'd have a little bit of an edge there, but it's different when the knees come in, the elbows come in. Nate Diaz can really do whatever he wants, put you in a guillotine, put you in all sorts of chokes. Nate Diaz is a veteran of the game. He knows how to put people into any kind of chokes. If Jake Paul just gets onto the ground with Nate Diaz, it's practically over. which is what I think would definitely happen. Nate Diaz would be able to take him down or trip him or get him on the ground, even put him in a standing guillotine like he did in their boxing match. I think this would be a huge mistake for Jake Paul going into MMA with Nate Diaz, a guy who's at the top level of MMA for so many years. It's not like he was ever a world champion in the UFC, but he had a great resume. He won the Ultimate Fighter. He was a huge name. He was a huge superstar. He beat Conor McGregor. And when he's never fought MMA in his life, to just debut against Nate Diaz is a terrible idea. There have been a couple different boxers that have tried out MMA, but none that have really been super successful. One that of course comes to mind is the short-lived MMA career of James Toney when he fought in the UFC. Jake Paul's a younger, more athletic guy than Nate Diaz, but I don't think that will matter in an MMA fight. Nate Diaz would be a huge favorite, and I think there's better options out there for Jake Paul, but regardless, he's put out this $10 million offer to Nate Diaz. He's been insisting on it this whole fight build-up, this whole lead-up. Been saying he wants to fight Nate Diaz, and I don't think it's the right move. Let me know your thoughts, though, in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, check out the video you see on screen, and I'm going to catch you guys in my next one.